So thank you so much for joining us today. We have Kate Reed Petty here with us. Her debut novel, True Story, was chosen as an editor's choice by the New York Times Review of Books in 2020, and it's currently a finalist for the Stoker Award for First Novel. Her work has also appeared in Electric Literature and American Short Fiction, among other places, and she has received support from the Mount, the Ruby's Artist Awards, and the SUNY Writers Conference. Thank you so much for being here today, Kate.
Thank you, Emma. Thanks for that very kind introduction. And thank you everybody who joined. It's such a pleasure to do this. As I was saying, I'm sad that I can't be in Williamsburg right now, but hopefully there's some people here who could join who maybe wouldn't be able to be here otherwise. So that's great. Loretta, hello. Nice to see you too. And yeah, and for anybody who is maybe watching this video later, I'm so glad that you got a chance to watch this as well. So let me hop on and share my screen so I can keep track of where I am in my presentation. So again, this is how to publish a novel is my presentation. I'm going to talk about building a career as a writer, talking about everything that I wish somebody had told me when I was a undergraduate at William & Mary as well. And just so you know, just so nobody feels anxious, I'm going to share this PDF with you at the end of the workshop, so you will have access to these slides. And we're going to have time for a Q&A at the end as well. Feel free to drop questions in the chat as you think of them. We'll try to sort of keep track, but I probably won't answer too many questions until the very end because there's a lot that I'm going to cover. So here is my name and email address and social media handles if you'd like to get those. So again, this is basically a book, This is a workshop about publishing a novel. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share advice about the publishing industry. I'm going to give you like a lot of information about different paths to book publishing. And I'm going to give you advice about building sort of a long-term career. I think I said something similar last year, but you know, when I was in college, I had this sort of fantasy about getting like a big break. Like somebody would pick me, they would like my work, they'd be like, you're amazing, and I would get a huge book deal and everything would be done forever. And what I found, what has actually happened in my life is that amazing things have happened, but what it is about like doing little things every day and kind of taking small steps along the way and building sort of a long-term lifestyle of being a writer. So the advice that I'm going to share today is going to be about a lot of little steps that you can do, and then work towards that long-term career. One thing, so this is not a craft talk. I'm not going to get into like the weeds about writing, different kinds of writing. If you do want to talk about those things, please definitely find me on social media. I love to geek out about that. I would be happy to. And I'm also not really going to talk that much about self-publishing. I'm going to talk about some indie publishers. So that could be helpful if you're even like want to start like a small publisher or something like that. No shade on self-publishing, but I just don't really have the expertise on that. So I'm not going to get too deep into that as well. So again, this all comes from my own experience. This is, I'm going to sort of share the things that I wish that somebody had told me when I was at William & Mary. Feeling like I could be a writer, like I first got sort of my, some positive feedback. I kind of learned the first things about short stories that I needed to know. So hopefully this will be sort of like a supplement to any writing classes that you would have taken about what it means to kind of leave the university atmosphere and go into the real world. And again, it comes from my personal experience. As Emma kindly said, my first book came out in August. I'll hold up a copy here too. No pressure, you know, definitely don't feel like you have to buy it. It's not that good anyway, no problem. Cool. So we are going to talk today about 3 different things. The first thing, I'm going to go through like multiple different paths to the book deal. Like what are the different ways that you can get a book deal? And this is like definitely literary fiction. It's going to apply if you're interested in like YA, mystery, any kind of genre fiction. It's going to work for poetry as well. And as well if you're doing some kind of like hybrid or experimental form, like, you know, half prose, half poetry. It does apply to children's publishing as well a little bit. And my caveat is with with creative nonfiction, definitely. So any kind of memoir or sort of, you know, hybrid memoir type thing that you want to do, this advice will apply. If you want to write a nonfiction book, like if you want to write, like I'm reading Caste right now, for example, that is a slightly different process. So you can ask me questions about the end. I know a few things, but that's not my expertise either. But again, paths to the book deal will be part one. We'll talk about like building your portfolio and building a community of writers. So those are those small steps along the way. And then part three is just about being kind and polite. I think it's really important in this world to make friends. And I think especially in the literary world, it's important to know how to interact with gatekeepers. So I'll talk about that as well. To start off though, I do want to take like 10 minutes and do a little bit of writing with you all, just like a little bit of personal reflection, because I think this is really important for a writing career. So hopefully everybody has, a pen and paper is great. You can do on your computer as well. The way that I do writing prompts with my writing classes is I'm going to kind of like take you through a series of different things. So I'm going to just read some questions out for you to write and think about. And I'm going to give you about 1 or 2 minutes for each. So this is going to be a pretty quick prompt, but hopefully you can use this later. So go ahead and gather your stuff, get ready to do a little bit of writing. And the first thing you're going to do is look at this list. I've made a list of like things that writing should do. Make the world better, create beauty, revolutionize society. Take 2 minutes and just kind of journal about one of these things or something else. What do you think writing should do? What is the goal of writing in the world? So just a couple of minutes to think about that. All right, wrap up your current thought, whatever it is. You can come back to this later. And the next thing I want you to write about is what are your gifts? So think about what are things that friends admire about you, things that you really try to do for the people you love. Maybe you're good at listening, you give good advice, maybe you're generous, helpful, maybe you're really fun to be around. And then also think about what are your gifts in writing? So what do you like about your own writing? Is it clarity? Is it honesty? Is it self-exploration? Do you write beautifully? Take 2 minutes and write about your gifts in both your personality and in your writing life. right, just a couple more seconds to wrap up your current thought. All right, and for the next 2 minutes, I want you to write down first 2 or 3 books or works or artworks or essays, anything that has been really meaningful to you, anything that was really important for your life. Try to think of the big touchstones. And I want to say too, you're not going to share these. So try to think about the ones that are truly meaningful to you. It doesn't matter if like they seem cool or it's like the right ones for other people to know. What really mattered to you? And then just write for 2 minutes about why they mattered, what they changed in your life. All right, 10 more seconds on this question. All right, now your final prompt, the last little piece of this exercise. For the final 2 minutes, let's take 3 minutes for this one because this is important. I want you to write about why you write. So what are your aspirations for your personal life, your career? What are your aspirations for just the art or the work that you want to create? Think about what you're writing in service of. And I encourage you to think about the 3 questions that you just wrote about your gifts, books that were meaningful to you, what you think literature should do. And just write a little bit about why you write. What are your goals? You have about 30 more seconds. All right, cool. Hopefully those are some like good food for thought. I imagine that there is a lot more there that maybe you'll want to write about later. The reason I wanted us to start with that is that I think before you start thinking about, you know, achievement and career and publications and all these things, I think it's just really helpful to really keep in front of you why you're writing and what you want to do with your writing. You know, it's totally fine if you're like, I want to like make a living as a novelist, or I want to write, say YA novels and I want to make a, you know, get a movie deal out of that or something. It's okay if you have like purely creative or purely career financial goals. But for me, for the kinds of writing that I do, I've been really lucky to be able to make it a career more recently, but it has been a long time of just kind of working nights and weekends, just in service of this story that I wanted to tell. And I have a lot of friends in the writing world, and there's just a lot of stages of the process that can be really challenging. So I have friends, for example, who would, you know, would have a couple of years of big success. They had a really great MFA program acceptance, and then a couple of dry years. And so, you know, other friends who have worked for a long time and feel like they haven't really gotten the success yet that they were hoping for. And I just feel like it's really helpful to keep this idea of like why you're writing in front of you, because at the basic level, it's a great way to just keep going. And also when you do have those successes, when you do have opportunities come through, this manifesto can keep you grounded, can help you make decisions, who you want to work with, the kinds of places you want to publish, the kind of things you want to publish. This is what really matters. So I like to start with that just to keep it in mind. So hopefully this will be top of mind as you're digesting a lot of very practical information that I'm going to give you. This can help you sort through. So let's go. Part one, paths to the book deal. Just talk about like different ways that a book deal can happen. And again, this doesn't really apply to nonfiction. I can talk about that later. I'll start just talking about like how I did it, which is like not, and kind of to give you a sense of like, there's not like a straight path and there's not sort of one way to do it. So I went to William & Mary. Right after William & Mary, I went to the University of St. Andrews for a master's program in fiction writing. And as I was there, I wrote my first novel. So I was like 23 years old. And I sent that book to a teacher who had been at William & Mary, Ian Caldwell. And he passed it along to his agent. And through that personal connection, I got my first agent at ICM, which is one of the big kind of agencies. So I was super young. And I had this agent, but like she and I had never met in person. And she had my book, and I hadn't really picked her. Like I had sort of like sent my book to a mentor who sent it to her. And all of a sudden we were working together. And she was really great. Like she was a good person, a super professional. But when she sent, I would say like she and I just weren't like the right creative collaborators. And she sent my book out to editors. I think she sent it to like eight editors at the big 5 publishers. And a little bit later, I'll talk more about like what it means to get an agent and go through the publishing process. But basically she was trying to get me a book deal. And the editors, like they all turned the book down. And she was like, this is as far as I go, like, you know, write another book and I'll work with you on that one. And I was like, okay, great. But it was still pretty like, it was like kind of devastating to be, I was super young and I was again, still waiting for that like lightning strike, somebody to pick me, book deal, gonna make me famous. And so I was like, I really don't know what to do. And she actually left the agenting business before I finished another novel. So then I was also like, it was like 2 or 3 years after that, she left agenting. So I was like, man, I don't even have an agent anymore. I don't know what to do. So then I spent about 10 years building my portfolio and building my writing community. So that's what we're going to go through in part 2 of this talk, like what that means. But sort of just spent 10 years working and, you know, beating my head against the wall and being like, gosh, if I don't publish a book by the time I'm 30, it's never going to be, you know, like my life is over, blah, 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 you know, silly things like that. But the sort of happy ending. So then in 2015, I started working on this book. And I feel like I had, like, all the work that I had put into it, I finally like clicked and I was like, oh, I know what I'm trying to write and I know what I'm working on. And I was having fun with the writing too. Like I was sort of able to create the whole novel while having a good time writing. And so that is the book that became True Story, that became my first published book. Once I had the manuscript finished, that was like 2000, early 2017, the manuscript was finished. And I sent it to my big brother because as a younger sibling, like I really care what he thinks. And I sent it to some like reader friends that I really trusted. I sent it to another, like a professional writer friend who gave me like really detailed feedback on it. So I edited the book a couple of times. And then I started querying agents. And we'll go through what that process looks like too. And I was querying agents, and I also went to the Sewanee Writers Conference that year. And at that conference, I met my current agent in person. So another thing we'll talk about at conferences, or one of the benefits of them, is that you get to meet agents face to face, which kind of gets you a little leg up on the slush pile of queries that they're reading. And so I had actually, I had sent my manuscript to her boss, to sort of like the fanciest head agent at the agency. And she had it for, I think, 2 weeks. And then I met Emily at this conference and I was like, oh, Emily, you're really great. And like, you know, she also had 10 years of experience. She wasn't the flashy kind of like famous name, but she and I really got along. She was like, she read the manuscript in like 2 days and was like, it's not really ready, but like, here's a couple things to change. So basically, I feel like I fell in love and was like, this is my agent. And she and I started working together. I took her feedback. It's important to note, like, she wasn't ready. I didn't actually have an agent at that point. Like I had like this person that I really liked who was kind of invested in my work. But in my experience, and I never signed anything. A lot of literary agents don't sort of have a formal thing that you sign. The point where you have the agent is when you like, they're like, great, I'm sending your manuscript to editors. And at that point, you're officially working together. So then the very happy ending of the story is that she and I worked together on the manuscript, I think like 6 or 8 months. We spent a long time kind of going back and forth and editing, and also agents, it takes them a while to read. So some of those months would be like, I sent it to her and then waited 6 weeks to sort of hear what she thought of it. But finally, June 2018, she was like, it's ready, I'm gonna send it out. So she gave me a list of editors that she was gonna send it to. Really important, make sure that if you're working with an agent, they should be very transparent about everything they're doing. So if an agent like doesn't give you a list of editors, it's a huge red flag. But she's like, here's the list of editors I'm gonna send it to. I looked at it, I was like, these sound great. These people sound smart. And then the lucky break that I got is that my editor at Viking was 7 months pregnant at the time. So she's like getting ready to go on maternity leave. So she read my book super fast because she wanted to read one more. She wanted to get one more book in her queue before she went on maternity leave. So she read it like overnight. She and I talked on the phone. Her interest pushed a couple of other editors to read quickly as well. So I was able to talk to a couple of different editors. So I was lucky also in that I not only sort of like fell in love with my agent, but I was able to kind of choose an editor that I was excited to work with, and a publishing house that I was happy with too. So the deal came together very quickly, which was wonderful. So that's sort of how it happened for me. Yeah, I guess there's not like a simple way to that path. I feel like it's just sort of the like keep failing forward kind of path until you make it work. But a lot of my philosophy and the things I've learned along the way, I'll share through this presentation. So let me just go through like a couple other paths, like the broad kind of like entry points to a book deal. The first are lightning strikes, which I like don't encourage you to try to go for because it's very rare and sort of hard to plan for. But you know, people with like a viral blog post or story, sometimes that will like get the interest of an agent or an editor, and they'll be willing to work with you to make it work. A great TikTok account. You can have a moving and astounding personal experience that gets you a memoir deal just because it's so amazing. But those are pretty rare. MFA programs. I have a lot of thoughts about this. Happy to chat more if anybody's interested. I've listed some of the like top most famous MFA programs at the top of this slide. And my advice, so my MFA, what was good about it for me was time to write, and it gave me some confidence and some like, I learned a lot about writing. but I paid for my MFA, so I would not necessarily recommend other people do that. It took me a while to pay those loans off. For me, I feel like the MFA programs that give you funding is the way to go. So there's more than just the top fancy ones that give funding, but there's enough that do provide funding for graduate programs. It's worth it to go for that. Of course, make your own decision. There's lots of reasons to pay for one as well, but for me, I feel like it's really important not to go into debt for this experience. I also encourage you to wait for the right fit. Make sure that you are excited about the professors who teach, that you feel good about the environment. Some of these, including, can be very competitive. They can feel kind of cutthroat, and that can actually set you back in your sort of writing confidence and ability. I also encourage you to make sure you're ready. So the benefits of a writing program, it's dedicated time to write, and it's dedicated time to make really good connections. So sometimes, first year out of college, you may not be ready for that time. Like, it might be better if you spend a couple years working, getting a sense of like your voice and what you want to do. Because like, to get the most out of the MFA program, you may really want to have a sense of where you want to go with your career before you dive into this. But that's up to you, of course. So another big path to a book deal. A lot of people get a job in publishing in New York City. You can do it in other cities too, but they're mostly in New York. So for example, there's online publishers like Catapult and BuzzFeed. Sorry, Catapult is a print publisher. They're connected to Electric Lit and Literary Hub, and so all of these are kind of connected. You can work as like a reader and editor there. You can get a job as like an editorial assistant as a Big Five publisher. You can work at a bookstore or a writing center like the Center for Fiction. So the downsides of these often entry-level jobs pay very poorly. It's like there's a big push in publishing to make these jobs pay better because it really sort of excludes people who don't have a strong kind of family financial backing. And at a time when publishing is trying to be more inclusive and representative and kind of open to more voices, the editorial assistant position that pays little is tricky. So worth it to think about what the finances that look like. For me, I never wanted to do a publishing job because I wanted to preserve the time to write. So, a job that was making me work 10-hour days, really working super hard, just didn't feel right for me. The flip side is that you do get really good experience and you do get great connections and mentors again. So there can be a reason to do those things as well. And sorry, and in terms of the path to the book deal, so what this looks like, there were 2 books last year that made me think of it specifically. And I'm going to blank on the names. A Burning by Megha Majumdar. Her book came out. She is an editor at Catapult. And so she's somebody who I think of as who has created a lot of connections through her professional work at the same time as she was writing her novel. And so when her novel came out, she was able to she had a lot of sort of allies ready to kind of help her. And it's also a fantastic book, so it certainly like helped it go far, but she's somebody who is able to balance those 2 lives together. So I feel like this is a valid way to kind of get a sense for the industry and make it work. You can also submit your manuscript directly to indie publishers as one way in. So if you have a full manuscript, you can find a publisher that you're interested in working with and just send it directly to them. These are often like much smaller deals. Often you won't get an advance with this, but you would get, for example, half of the proceeds might be a deal that you would get. These are a couple, University of Press of Kentucky published a book called The Red Shirt last year that was on the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize shortlist. So that was just a good example of an indie book that can really break through. Barrel House are like lovely people. They're based in Baltimore and DC. And it's like a very supportive kind of small publisher. So some people like the indie publishers because you can push boundaries, you can do unusual things, and it's a more community-based thing. So sometimes it's a nicer way to live as a writer too. If you want to publish with a Big Five publisher, which is like Macmillan, Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster, and I can't list the other 2, but there's basically only 5 major publishers, I think 2 just combined. What you need to do is have your finished manuscript, and then you need to find an agent. And agents will accept queries from anybody. There's instructions on their websites about you can email them. They have a very specific sort of amount of your book that they want you to send. So you can, you basically, it's like 10 or 50 pages of the book, depending on how much they're willing to read. So you send that in to them, and they, if they want to read the whole thing, they'll ask for the whole manuscript. If they like it and they want to represent you, they'll talk to you. Ideally, you'll get a couple of agents interested at the same time so you can find the right fit. But I do encourage people to, even if you only have one agent who's like, yes, I want to represent your work, really make sure, this is a person who's going to work for you. So make sure it's somebody that you feel comfortable working with. And I recommend querying about 10 at a time if you do get to this point that you want to go through, because it takes a while for them to get back to you. So you don't want to just like send it to one person and cross your fingers. I recommend like send to 10, maybe wait 2 weeks, send to 10 more, wait 2 weeks. A good number to shoot for, like I would be ready to query 40 or 50 agents before, let me caveat that. If you don't get any responses for like the first 20, you might want to adjust your query letter. But overall through the process, you want to query like 40 or 50, just because it takes a lot to find the right fit. So don't get discouraged. It's one of my big pieces of advice in general is like, just keep trying, because it's a lot of timing and luck. Oh yeah, Jane Friedman, and thank you. A great resource for like the nitty gritty of how to reach an agent. She's fabulous. And then finally, the big path to book publishing is to build your portfolio and your community. So, if you have a great manuscript, you can get an agent, that agent can get you a book deal for it. Like it really is just about the manuscript. But if you email that agent and you say, I've published short stories in these 3 magazines. I had this essay in the Modern Love column in the New York Times, or, I've written a bunch of essays for LitHub. If you can sort of show that you're part of the community and that you're really doing the work, that'll make you more appealing to agents. They'll read your sample more closely because they want to work with somebody who is building a long-term career as a writer, not just one book. Grants and awards, which we'll go over, and then friends and allies can also really help you going forward. So let's talk about all of those things. Part 2, building a portfolio and building your community. And as I go through this, I'm going to kind of like all of this is like a very high level introduction to like how to do things, that there's a lot more information online. So there's a lot of this that you're going to want to like dig into the specifics of. And again, I'm happy to answer questions. So broadly, some things you can do. And again, these are those like little steps along the way. You can publish short stories and book reviews and nonfiction in literary magazines. You can publish nonfiction essays online or in print publications. You can do book reviews. You can win grants and residencies. You can go to writing conferences. And then you can, form your own writing group, join writing groups. And this is also includes like, local reading series, local literary communities, volunteering with a group. So if you're not familiar with literary magazines, here's like a list of a few examples. They tend to be really focused on literature. So they will do creative nonfiction and book reviews, and short stories and fiction primarily. The reason that literary magazines are great, first of all, it's a great way to make friends. I feel like I didn't know this before I started doing it, but when you have an editor publish a book or a short story that you've written, you email back and forth with them, you talk about your work, you follow them on Twitter, and suddenly they're a literary friend. So that's like a great way just to make that connection. Same with like the other writers who are published in the same issue as you are, or if you see other people, it's a great way to sort of start to make those connections, because likely if you're in the same literary magazine, you're working in something that's resonant with these other writers as well. So it's good to connect with them. Great to build your bio, attracts agents. It's similarly, when the agents are submitting your work, if they can brag about your literary magazine publications, that'll help you get a book deal. And then also, it really does improve your work. Like working with an editor was some of the most instructive writing work that I had ever done, to have somebody like read your work really closely, ask you about your intentions, make suggestions to make it stronger. So it's just good experience. Like even if you feel like you're like, oh gosh, I'm not really ready for a book deal, publishing your first couple of short stories will be really instructive and useful. So things to look for, like the things that make a magazine really strong, when they win prizes, and also I say strong, it's both about like literary prestige, and it's also like who is right for you. So are the people on the masthead the kind of people the kind of people you want to work with. Does the masthead reflect like your taste in literature, the kind of diversity that you want to see in the literary world? Does it reflect the, I mean, age is a big one to think about as well. There's some that have like sort of established, revered, old lion literary people who are on the masthead. And for me, sometimes I'm excited to work with some of these newer magazines that are younger people kind of bringing new energy to. You want to think about who else they publish and what is their taste. Is it the kind of work that you are excited by? Because then they're more likely to publish your work as well. And the way to find literary magazines, writers' bios will always list the magazines that they've been published in, so that's a great way to find new ones. Twitter is really useful. Like, it's still sort of the center of the media, social media world, so there's lots of literary magazines. People will put lists on Twitter all the time. And then at the end of this, I'm going to share with you a spreadsheet that I keep that is, there's going to be a list of literary magazines on there, but also includes some like newsletters and digests and people who regularly share open calls for submissions. So that's a good way to find new ones too. So I'm like racing through all of this because I want to leave lots of time for questions. But in addition to publishing fiction, creative nonfiction, publishing nonfiction essays is a great way to make your name. And especially if you feel like you're still kind of making your fiction, like finding your voice if you are writing fiction or memoir. Nonfiction essays is like, I don't want to say it's like easier or a lower bar, but it is more like, you're not like, with me, I'm not swinging for the fences if I'm writing like a personal essay for online the same way that I am with a short story. So I feel like my standards for what I'm willing to publish are a little bit lower, still high, but it's not like it has to be like earth-shatteringly creative. It's just like, what do I want to share with somebody? Again, just like with literary magazines, it's a great way to make friends. The editors you work with will be your buddies. And it's also a great way to learn to write. Again, you get that really close attention on what you've written. Super instructive. I listed a few examples here. There's a few more in the spreadsheet. And also I would love if everybody like has websites that they like to read essays on. I would love to hear them because I feel like I'm not as in touch as I used to be. So please share with me what's like the new great place to read. So as with a literary magazine, if you're just breaking in, when you get more experience, you can sometimes just pitch an idea. But when you're just starting out, you need to write the whole essay first. Write a great headline and spend a lot of time writing a short summary, because then you're going to pitch that directly to the editors at the websites. And when you pitch, I encourage you to think about not just writing what the essay is about, but why you're writing it right now. So why is this relevant? Because they really care about what people are thinking about right now. And also, why are you the writer for this? Like, why is this your piece to publish? And Meg, thanks for the question. I do read Medium. And I feel like I don't know the verticals that they have within Medium, like which to follow specifically. I mostly follow links to Medium, but it's a good option for sure. Yeah. The other great thing about Medium is that when you're pitching editors, if you can share links to other works that you've published, that is very, like, it's going to mean a lot to them, and Medium totally counts for that too. So the big tricky thing is like, oh, I know I want to pitch an article to Vox, but like, where do I find the editor who's going to care about this? Twitter is a great place to look. Editors will also often put on Twitter, they'll be like, I'm looking for essays about XYZ. I'm looking for like, I'm accepting pitches now. So Twitter is a great place to find that. The masthead, and specifically on the website, is really useful. So you're probably looking for like the web editor or the online editor. And then sometimes they'll be like, the books and literary life editor or something like that. Or whatever your essay is about, there'll be somebody for that sort of topic. And then again, just like with literary magazines, look at the writers that you like and see where they have published essays as well. And that's a great place to find it. So in addition to publishing, grants and residencies are great because it's tangible support for your work. So it's so valuable. And also this means a lot to agents and editors too. Like if you're getting these kinds of things, it shows you're really putting the work in. So you can get grants from state and local governments is a great place to look. foundations and nonprofits have them. There's a lot of literary organizations, and then there are artist communities that are just dedicated to residencies and fellowships. I encourage you, these are going to be in the spreadsheet I share with you too. I encourage you with these to definitely keep a list, because the, you know, the application period opens every year. So continually kind of like, excuse me, keeping your pipeline going of applications is really great. Some of them will host information sessions. Creative Capital is one of the best. They do great information sessions about how to apply for the Creative Capital Award. And they have just good advice on how to apply for anything. So it's a really good inside scoop into what juries are looking for. Also, like there's one, the Rubies is a grant I got here in Baltimore. And when I went to the information session, the person leading it like went through what each sort of paragraph of the personal statement should be. Like she gave like very clear directions. And I feel like it was so helpful to look through that. The big challenge is that you are gonna have to write a personal statement of some kind of artist statement or meaning. And again, similarly, it's gonna be like, you know, why are you writing and why are you the person to write what you're working on? Like, why does this matter? And what these groups wanna hear too is they wanna hear like, why is this urgent for you now in your career? Like, why are you in a point where our help will make a difference? Because they really do want to help writers move forward. So the manifesto exercise that we did at the top is a good way to start thinking about that, because you want to really you want to say something authentic to you. And I think I've served on a couple of juries, and you can really tell when somebody is speaking honestly about why they do their work. And then the other tip that is so great, a lot of these like foundations and state governments, they'll give you feedback on your application. If you are rejected for the grant or the residency, you can write, you know, say, thank you, could I have feedback? And sometimes they'll share the jury's notes, the panel's notes with you. Sometimes the program manager will just kind of walk through it, but that is super instructive too and can really help you get it the following year. And that's why I say also, you know, plan to apply 5 times. Like when I was 20, I would like send a short story to the New Yorker and then be like, oh, they said no, like why, you know, what's going on? But I got a residency a couple of years ago to the Edith Wharton House, and it was the 3rd year in a row that I had applied. And so it was like the first time that I was like, oh, if I just like continue to apply, the program managers recognize you, they can sort of see you improving your work. So there's a little bit of like a personal connection there. And also, you know, the juries change every year. What they're sort of looking for in the cohort changes every year. So again, it's just some of it is about luck and timing. So plan to really stick with it. And then this is one of the best ways just to like keep your heart open in your writing life. Finding your local reading series, literary organizations, and being part of those can really help you make friends, keep the inspiration up. There's been a lot of times when I've like gone to just read at an open mic, and it makes me feel good about writing again when I feel like I'm in a fallow period. So looking for those can be really valuable. Another way to do that too, a lot of literary magazines are open to volunteers. So you can volunteer to be a reader or even a proofreader for them. Being a reader is great. So that means that you are like every 2 weeks, you'll get 10 short stories from the slush pile. And it's your job to say, like, do these stories go to the editors or do we send a rejection to them? And what that helps you do is sort of, you get your sense of like, what is everybody writing about right now? It's sort of amazing when you do it to see how many like, gosh, there's so many short stories coming in that happen in like a rehab center right now. I don't know why, but I'm not going to write a story about a rehab center right now because the market is full of them, like that kind of thing. And you also just see like, you see like the things that writers do when they're not thinking about it or when they're like imitating another writer or something. You sort of see these trendy pieces. And so it really helps you kind of like develop your taste and see those things in your own work that maybe come from osmosis rather than inside of you. And then finally, conferences are so great. Again, I met my agent at the Sewanee Writers Conference. I also met some like really excellent writers who then were willing to blurb my book when it came out. So they're a bigger investment of time. Sometimes there's a financial investment as well. but they can be a really valuable thing, especially when you're at the right point where you're ready for this. So there's a list of a few here. AWP and Barrel House, these are like shorter weekend conferences. Things like Sewanee and Breadloaf are like 2 weeks long. The great question about volunteering at conferences, definitely ask. The one like Breadloaf and Sewanee don't take volunteers. They have staff who work there, and part of the staff's motivation is to like be at the conference. Barrel House definitely takes volunteers. AWP definitely takes volunteers. So it's always worth it to ask. And then that's a great way to make friends too, because the other volunteers are probably people like-minded and writers as well. And the reason to go to conferences, I would say making friends is the #1 reason. Again, it's just like so valuable to know other writers. I feel like this is really good advice that I hear frequently is that I don't know if this is true in other art forms, but there's so much jealousy in writing, and there's this sense that it's like a zero-sum game, and that like if somebody else is successful, that's the only book deal that year, and like nobody else can get it. No, I'm never going to get what I want. And in my own life, what I found is that like the more the people around me are succeeding, the more I am succeeding, and vice versa. That it's actually sort of like you really like the more you're part of a community, there really is so much. There's so many readers out there. There's like such a big literary world. It's not cutthroat. And I think the more you approach it as like wanting to be part of a community, the happier you'll be. And it just works better. It's just like, it's a good way to be. So at conferences, you can make those kinds of friends. You can also meet mentors and allies. The teachers of these are often very well established and will be very like happy to help you and give you recommendations. Agents and also editors come to like give presentations and talk at these. And then you can get good writing advice, and they're great for inspiration too. I did mention there's like a financial investment sometimes. There's often grants that you can get. Definitely check for like a state and local grant that might be available. So like a lot of states will have sort of like arts grants, and you can use those to pay your conference fee. Sewanee also has like fellowships that make it very affordable. And then I advise you to like go in with a strategy. So for example, say like when I went to Sewanee, I was like, I have this manuscript and I'm going to try to find an agent. So I had like a very specific goal. But I went again a couple of years later, and I was really just looking for like allies and connections, like other writers who were kind of like at my level, who would be willing to kind of share with me what they were going through, and we could just kind of talk and get the experience. And so my strategy was like, I'm just going to like look for people that I feel really sort of in sync with, and I'm going to try to make 3 friends. So having that kind of like a strategy, because they can be overwhelming. It's a lot of people. It's like a lot of pressure. Having like a clear idea of what you're trying to get can be really useful. And I love the Facebook recommendation too in the chat, 100%. So cool. So part 3, last little thing I want to talk about is just like, how do you engage with gatekeepers in the literary world? Like, how do you sort of interact with people? And the conferences is a really good example, because, for example, you might meet like a pretty famous writer, right? Like somebody who's like pretty well established, and they like take a little bit of interest in your work. They're willing to help you. Like when I started doing that, I was like, I don't know how to ask for your help. Like, you're a famous writer. Like, I don't know what to say to you, or like, so I was sort of shy. So what I'm going to talk about now is like encouraging you to keep in touch with people who definitely want to help you with your work. The first tip, and I feel like this is the gold tip, is just like always thank people. So if a literary magazine rejects a short story that you submit to them, I always send a thank you note, like, thank you for reading it. I really appreciate it. If you don't get a grant, I always thank the panel. If I do get a grant, I thank the panel. Basically, everybody who is in this is here because they like love books, and like everybody is overworked and stressed and like trying as hard as they can. So if you send a thank you note, people will remember you and feel tenderly towards you in the future. I'm not saying it's like going to get you something, but it means you're part of the community, and it really means a lot. Similarly, I mean, I just did, when my book came out, I did a lot of events at bookstores, and somebody was like, make sure you write a thank you note to every bookstore that hosted you, because they like put a lot of work into it, and you want to make sure that you're valuing that work. Oh, just, one thing that means too, like everybody should write me a thank you note after this presentation. Like it includes, even if it's not one-on-one, like I gave you my email address, send me a note and I will. And I think there's some people in this room who did that last year who are in this presentation. So good job. But yeah, I'm happy to give you advice, especially if you write me a thank you note today, you can email me in 6 months and be like, oh, hey, I have this question. And I'll be like, yeah, of course. I love that you wrote me a thank you note. So quick example of like the kinds of people that can help you. There's literary magazine editors, writing teachers, agents, editors, people who support literary. Often these are all the same people, right? Like these people switch between these different roles. So it's really valuable to keep these connections. I have a friend who just became the managing editor of Bomb magazine, and like we've just been buddies for 10 years, and now he's like, and like he's always been kind of like he's been like a really sort of dedicated, interesting writer, and now all of a sudden he has a very high-powered job. So that's what I mean about like the people around you as they become more successful. It's like, oh, this is a great, like this has been a dear friend and now is also a good connection. So thinking about that kind of networking is really valuable. And I say networking in the sense of like building community. It's not like I was cynically friends with this man for 10 years, hoping that he would get a good job, right? It's just like, oh, this is good to have these friends. So when you meet somebody, when you meet that famous writer, thinking about the ways that you can keep in touch with them is really valuable. So things that are totally appropriate. Connecting on social media, totally appropriate. Like not like spamming somebody, not like reaching out a bunch, but follow them. You can send a thank you note as like a Twitter direct message, just totally counts, right? If you want to start a newsletter, that can be a great way to keep in touch. Say like, oh, do you mind if I add you to my newsletter? And then, send something out about your writing every month, and that's plenty. Going to conferences is also a good way to sort of keep up with people you know. And then I'm just a big fan of the friendly email. So like occasionally, like if you publish a short story, for example, or if you have like an essay online, feel free to send that to people that you have met before, that you like, just a quick friendly note. Just wanted to share this, hope you're well. If you see they publish something, it's always great to read it and reach out and compliment them on it. Writers are like so insecure and nervous and like just like feed off of any kind of compliment whatsoever. So anytime you're reaching out to like compliment somebody's work, it's wonderful. Do what feels natural to you, for sure. Like it's not about like being like sleazy about it or anything, but if you sort of think of people as like friendly peers and colleagues in this field, you will find ways to kind of reach out and connect. And so the kinds of favors that you can ask for, right? And like these are the kinds of things that are totally appropriate. Don't email Tim O'Brien and say, can you read my story? Or don't email somebody that you just met and immediately ask them to read my story. But if you have, if you've exchanged a couple of emails, if you've complimented their work, if you feel like it's appropriate, you can totally say, would you be willing to read this story? Maybe offer to exchange the favor if they have something you'd like to read. For example, I'm not so busy. I'd be happy to read anybody's short story if they want my thoughts on it. You can ask people to pass a story along. So for example, if you have a friend who becomes a managing editor of a literary magazine, you can submit to them. You can also say, would you mind sharing this with somebody, just to kind of take the pressure off of them. You can ask people to recommend an agent. You can ask them if they have thoughts about agents. It's really great to sort of get the back channel gossip about people in the industry from these connections. Same with editors. When you do get a book deal, you can ask these people to blurb your book or maybe to do an event with you to kind of promote your book. You can also ask people like, is it appropriate to ask this favor of another person? Like if I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I should ask so-and-so if they can blurb, I can ask my other writer friend, I can get a gut check from them on it. So I highlight these just because I feel like I am always shy about asking favors. And I feel like it's really valuable to remember. I mean, I personally love to do favors for people. Like anytime somebody asks me for something, I feel like, oh, they think they respect me, they respect my work. I'm like happy to help. Whereas when I ask a favor of somebody, and this is even my friends, I feel like, oh no, they're going to hate me. They don't want, they'll say no and they'll never talk to me again. But So I try to remind my workshops as a way of reminding myself that people are happy to do favors for you. So just a few like do's and don'ts of what it is to ask a favor, especially somebody who maybe is a little bit more established than you are. It's great to ask for advice. People love to give advice. That's probably like the easiest ask of all because everybody loves to share their opinion. But just be careful about asking things that can be easily found online. So like, don't ask how to write a query letter to an agent, for example, because there's lots of samples online. Instead, you want to say, oh man, I'm not sure if I should include all 5 of my short story publications or just the best 2, you know, that kind of thing. Like very specifics is useful. It's good to follow up after a week. Like if you ask a favor of somebody, it's also totally okay to sort of ask again a week later. I have a couple of emails in my email inbox right now that I have not responded to, and I feel so guilty. And if somebody follows up a week later, I'm like, oh good, I'm not going to forget it. So, you know, definitely make sure it's a polite, quick follow-up. Definitely wait at least a week, even 2 weeks maybe is better. And also just don't give up and get angry. Like even if you don't follow up, if you don't hear back from somebody, give them the benefit of a doubt, right? Like maybe they had like a crazy time. We've all had a crazy time for the past year. It's okay to sort of like touch base with them again in the future. Maybe don't ask another favor right away, but don't write them off completely if you don't hear back. Again, it's good to check with a friend. Ask somebody that you trust if they think this favor is appropriate to ask. Be careful about what you're talking about on Twitter. I feel like there's lots of stories of somebody, or whatever social media you're using, there's stories of somebody, you know, turning around and talking about the interaction that they've had on social media, and often the people you're talking about see it. So just be careful. And again, I kind of hit this already, but people love to help, right? Like definitely ask favors. It is a good way to keep in touch with people, but also think about, you know, are you only reaching out asking for favors? Like think about ways you can keep in touch in between, even just like sending a quick little hello or something nice so that somebody feels like you're building a relationship and not just asking favors. Cool, I went right up until the end of the hour. I had hoped to finish 10 minutes early for the Q&A, but I have 15 minutes and I'm happy to hang around and chat and answer any questions. Again, maybe Emma, you can go ahead and share the spreadsheet that has resources in it with everybody, and also this slideshow. So everything I kind of just raced through, you have to kind of pour over and look more closely. Class is officially dismissed if anybody wants to leave or if anybody's finished, but I'm happy to hang out and answer any and all questions now. Feel free to raise your hand or pop a question in the chat box.
Yeah, this is the last workshop of the day, so we have time now if you want to stay. Yeah, so chat or raising your hand, whatever works. And I just sent those links in the chat, so everyone should be able to see them now.
Thank you, Emma.
I would have a question. Thank you so much for your time. I've been thinking about nonfiction creative writing master's programs, and I wonder how you would direct us to like look into hearing about different ones. Like I feel like I've become very aware that any list online, someone's behind it, someone's paid to write it.
Sure, for sure.
Starting to get a sense, and I think it's probably chatting to a lot of people, but.
Yeah, and again too, I think like the like looking at bios of writers that you admire. It's funny, I feel like I can really see my shortcomings now because I'm like, I can't name what's the biggest nonfiction master's program right now. I know Iowa has a great one. So that's like the country's best fiction program. They have a really excellent and interesting nonfiction, creative nonfiction program as well. But yeah, I think, you know, like look at, like there's so many like amazing nonfiction writers. I think Melissa Favos went to a program and I can't remember where she went, but sort of looking at people's bios is a great way to check it out. And yeah, you know, I think that's actually a great, like, maybe that's one of the best favors you can ask is you can probably cold email alumni and just like ask if they have advice or like thoughts about it. Cause I feel like people love to like spill the tea about their own program that they went through. So that's a great way to reach out and make connections too.
Ted.
So now, having gone through the process of writing a novel, getting a novel published, and having it be out there in the world, is there any sort of one major thing that you wished you had done differently in the process?
You mean like the publishing process, going through it?
Yeah, or like any of the part of it was what, I guess, what was the thing that you would change, and what is the thing that sort of worked best? If you could sort of sum those two things up.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I'm beating my head against the wall most right now, which I don't know if it was possible to change, but I wish that I had finished the manuscript for my second novel before the first was published. That was my goal, and it didn't happen. And I'm still like working on the second book. And it is really hard. I mean, I don't mean to complain, but like, I now have all of the Goodreads reviews voices in my head. And so it's harder and harder to write the second book, which I knew was going to happen. And I was hoping to like avoid it, but it was just, there was a lot going on. So I guess the thing I would think about is, you know, I didn't really get in this presentation into like the year that goes into publishing and like all the details that went through like working with the publishing house. But I think I would give myself more of a break with that year. There's like a lot to do that I didn't fully, like I thought shouldn't take that much time. And in retrospect, it's like, oh yeah, it was like the most important thing to me was that the first book came out well. And so the time that I spent on, you fill out an author questionnaire for your publicity team to use in like pitching you on interviews, you know, and it takes 2 days to kind of answer those questions because you really have to think about it. So I think I would be easier on myself with doing all of the things that you have to do that don't feel like your art, but are still important. And I will say too, you know, one thing that I had a lot of conversations about with, and this might be the most relevant, is that there's this constant debate about like, do I trust my publishing team or do I like push them to do things the way I think they should do it? And every writer will tell you something different. I took the approach of really trusting my publishing team. My feeling was like, they have done this a lot. The risk of that is that, you know, their goal is financial, whereas my goal is more complicated than that. And so by taking their advice, I'm sometimes maybe slipping on the side of like there was a couple presentations where they like marketed my book purely as a thriller. And I was like, oh, I don't think it's going to really work for that because it's not a traditional thriller. But I let them do it because I was like, I'm going to trust their professionalism, and also because I sort of wanted to. I didn't know for a fact that I was right in that case. I was like, maybe it is a thriller. Like I'm who am I to say? So that was how I did it, and I'm glad that I did it that way, and it worked well. So I can speak for that approach, but I also totally understand why anybody would want to like be more of a David Lynch about it and make sure that their like book gets published the way that they see exactly. So, yeah. Loretta?
Will you offer some thoughts on, I have one or two writer friends who are like, oh, I would never write a book before I had a book deal.
Uh-huh.
Will you offer some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if you want to get a book deal and you haven't written the book, you have to have like an amazing social media presence. Like you have to like prove that you can sell a book. So you have to be like, yeah, I've written a cover story for The Atlantic, or I have 300,000 Twitter followers or like TikTok followers or 1 million TikTok or whatever. Like you have to have some reason to have this book deal besides the work that you're going to do. So that is possible, right? So like if you publish like a nonfiction book, you write a book proposal, you get the money for the advance, and then you write the actual book. But again, you know, the book proposal itself is often 6 months of work. Like it's a really like detailed document. And then you know, just like, I'm not that good at social media. So like, I can't convince somebody to give me a book deal, except on the strength of what I've already written.
Sorry to interrupt, but I kind of think of it totally the way you're saying it, but her thought was almost more like an editor wouldn't want the whole book to be written, which I wouldn't think is how it works. And it sounds like you don't either.
Was it nonfiction?
Yeah.
And like creative nonfiction?
Not that creative nonfiction.
Not that creative, yeah. Yeah, I mean, with nonfiction books, it's true that they like, the editors buy it on the book proposal for sure. But like there might be exceptions for like a memoir or a creative nonfiction piece, like a collection of essays. That like I can see an editor like buying a collection of essays based on the strength of like 4 or 5 essays, and then
But you don't think it's a negative to have?
no. I mean, like editors are going to change things no matter what. Like they're going to want to like offer advice, but yeah, it's definitely safer to have the whole thing.
Diana?
Hi, sorry, I don't have a camera, so I can only speak. My question is more, I suppose, around age. So let's say in my case, I'm an older person, right? I come from a different industry and I'm sort of like in the later stages of my life, and I decided this is it's always been a dream of mine to write the book. But I know from your presentation too, you did a lot of things on taking classes and getting an education in this. How important? So for somebody like me, would you discourage somebody, like since you don't have a formal education in this or you're not taking classes, would you discourage somebody from the idea of writing a book? Because literally all I'm using for resources is I'm looking for writing groups, and I'm looking for books on how, how to spell things correctly, grammar, and all the resources I can find on. And I've found a lot of information online in short classes, on how to write your first novel or how to work out your chapters. So I've been doing that for a bit, and I've collected a lot of resources that way. But do you think that's a fair way to approach it, I suppose, versus getting a formal education?
Definitely. That's a great question, Diana. Thank you for sharing. I 100% agree. I mean, I feel like I did get a formal education in fiction writing, and the specific one that I get was not that helpful to me in a career. And what was more valuable was like, the small classes, the writing groups, the kinds of things that you're talking about, and doing the work. Yeah. And I think too that, I mean, if you did choose to, for example, like if you wanted to apply for an MFA program, I know that many are open to, all kinds of non-traditional students, including people who are not, in their early 20s.
Oh, that's great.
So it is a possibility. Same with like the writing conferences that I mentioned. Those could like Red Loaf and Sewanee can be good, like kind of boot camp, not to use a military metaphor, but kind of like intensive, short writing education experiences as well. You go through like a workshop process, but definitely, I mean, I think what's important is the work that you're doing, and that you feel that you're able to do the work you want to do.
Great.
People who love books, like there, you will find people who love your work and who want to support you, and it's completely valid. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Christian.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, so once you've written your manuscript, how do you know when you're ready to start sending out these queries? Do you need to like take the time beforehand to start building that portfolio, building up your bio, or can you just start sending them out?
That's such a good question. Yeah, such a good question. You definitely want to send this, like your manuscript, to be like as strong as you can make it before you send it to agents, because if they're not impressed with it the first time, it's going to be like, there's occasions where you can say like, would you read an edit or something, but often like it's just going to be like a no, and you're not going to be able to engage with them. So you really want the manuscript to be as good as possible. I think that the question about building the portfolio, I don't think so. I don't think that you should wait. Like, don't like put all your eggs into like the book publishing deal basket. The metaphor breaks down. Don't like do that work, and also be thinking about other ways you can build support outside, because even if you do get an agent and a book deal, they're going to want blurbs for your book. They're going to want like other, you to publish essays to help promote it. So all of those things are things that are going to be useful to you no matter what. So keep that track open. But I don't think you need to wait for a great resume. Especially there is, I hate to sort of say it, but there is a cachet to being like young. So if you are still in school and like reaching out, I think that can be sort of an exciting thing for agents as well. But I will say, again, you want the manuscript to be really strong. So that means If you have a writing teacher, if they're willing to read it, you want to send it to them. There's professional editors, so people who work at literary magazines who will sort of take a freelance job and like give your manuscript a read and give you feedback on it. Things like that you can do before you send it out can really increase your chances of getting the attention. But yeah.
I'm curious for current students, if there were certain skills you developed or experiences you had while at William and Mary that you feel like prepared you well, whether that's classes or writing for student publications.
Yeah, definitely. My first writing classes were at William and Mary, and so it's where I like learned the workshop model. I remember like reading House on Mango Street with like a close creative writing lens and like looking at how the sentence structure worked, which was really helpful to sort of see. I didn't write for any publications at William and Mary, weirdly, and I can't remember why, but I should have. It's definitely like a valuable thing to be doing. And yeah, I also just like I used to go to the Barnes and Noble and read the literary magazines there. So if you don't know, like Barnes and Noble, I hope they still do. They've changed so much because the business model has changed. But they used to have like in the magazine section there would be a line and you could get like American Short Fiction and Harper's and the Paris Review, and I would just like read them in the Barnes and Noble and like get a sense of what is the short fiction that's being published right now. So that was really helpful too. And of course the library. The SWEM has subscriptions to the Paris Review and all those things, so you can also do it there.
Ted.
So at what stage in writing your manuscript do you seek out an editor to sort of get another set of eyes on it? You would do that sort of after you try to find an agent, or would you consult an editor before even sending it out to agents?
I would do it. So there's two editors. There's like the editor who gives you a book deal. So like at a publishing house, there's people who are employed as editors, and their job is to like select your book. They give you your advance, and they like shepherd you through the process. They're your best friend and your closest ally. There are also freelance editors who can just give you feedback on a manuscript, and you pay them, or you know them and you trade, like you give each other feedback on your manuscripts, that kind of situation. And I would reach out to that person before I reached out to an agent. So like with my novel, I traded with a couple of friends who are also professional writers, or committed writers, I should say. And I've also read their novels and gave them feedback. So getting like having somebody who's willing to really go through your whole manuscript, and it's things like sometimes there's a plot point and the editor will look at this and say like, this makes no sense to me, and it's the kind of thing that like I can't see as a writer because I'm so close to it. I'm like, no, of course the man walks through that door because the whatever, and the editor's like, no, a real human wouldn't work that way. So like an editor can catch that. They can catch it if you have like a like I use the word little all the time in my first drafts. Like everything is like a beautiful little cup or like a beautiful little sunray. And like, so they can catch those kinds of like writing tics that you are not able to see yourself. They can give you advice on just, all those kinds of things. So somebody who can really professionally look at it closely, that will just like, it will help so much with getting the agent. It's definitely worth it to do before the agent. And once you have an agent, you shouldn't need to, it's always valuable to have friends, but like, once you have an agent, you can sort of like trust your agent's feedback and then like trust your editor's feedback going forward. I take that back. It's useful to have like, sometimes you can triangulate with another writer too and be like, is my agent right on this? Is it not? It's always your work, but getting that editor support is definitely useful before the agent. Yeah, I feel like that like the word little in the title is just as useful as like, or just as common as like the girl on the whatever. Like it's like, it is for whatever reason, a charming word, but I don't use it anymore. Cut it out. I probably have time for one more question if anybody has one.
Abby?
Is there ever a point with a manuscript where you feel like it's not it? Like, I just feel like it's a hard thing if there's something that you just keep getting rejections on and you've improved as a writer. At what point do you say like, this was a good experience, but
Yeah.
I'm done with it?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good question, Abby, and so common and true. I actually just saw, I don't know if anybody knows George Saunders' work. I'm a huge fan, but I just saw him give a talk a week ago. And in his new book, he talks about like the couple years after he got out of his MFA program, and he was writing things. And I think similarly, like sending a novel out and it wasn't hitting. And he was like, well, I want to write something publishable. And he sort of like went back and kind of reevaluated how he was writing. And the way he says it is that he started writing, he stopped writing to teach the reader something, and he started writing as if he was having a conversation with a dear friend. And so he like sort of shifted the tone of his writing. So he talks about that, like setting aside that project, like that heartbreak made him a better writer also. I think for me, like same experience, my first agent, my first novel didn't sell. I still have that book in a drawer, and I'm like, I look at it every couple of years and I don't know how to feel about it or what to do about it, but I'm ultimately happy that it's not published, like it wasn't the right one. So the question of like, when do you make that decision? I think I never want, I feel like many people give up too fast. Like it's easy to give up after like, oh, I queried 4 agents and nobody bit, and so I'm going to give up. So it's like, you don't want to give up too fast, but I do think that it's really healthy to hit that point where, and sometimes it's not even like, this is not the right project. Sometimes like, this is not the right time for this project, or this is not the right moment for me. I mean, maybe it's like a very ambitious thing that you've written, and I hate to say like the world isn't ready for it, but maybe the world isn't ready for it from a like unknown voice. And like, once you have a couple more under your belt, you can get people to pay attention to it and take it seriously. So what I do is I usually have a couple of projects going, or at least a couple of projects on like a couple of novel ideas that I'm excited to work on, short stories. I feel like it's good to, it's always fine to take a month and set a project aside and work on something else, because eventually you need like lots of things cooking anyway. Give it a little time, come back to it, decide if you want to give it a little more time, or if you want to push forward again. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Kate. And thank you everybody for coming by for this workshop. It's been so wonderful and so helpful. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you all for being here. It's such a joy to see faces in this time. So I appreciate your attention and time.